Hey everybody, Nick here, and this morning we are gonna actually do some disassembly on this big guy right here. This is the Kizer Megatherium, Elijah Isham design, or Isham, that's right. Anyways, so I am going to, as soon as I can wrangle up a screwdriver bit here, go ahead and jump into it. One thing to note about this knife is that it does have these carbon fiber bolsters. The thing is, you don't actually need to remove the bolsters. All you need to do is remove this screw, and this screw, and the knife comes apart. And so there's not a whole lot of reason to mess around with that. And considering that to remove the bolster on this side, you need to also take off the clip, it just doesn't seem right. So I'm going to go ahead and not do that. And I'm using a Torx T8 screw right here, which is plenty nice. And I'll go ahead and pop this little guy off as well. I've done this once already, as I've carried this knife actually a fair amount in preparation for the review. But I did this shortly after I got it, just to see if I could help the action along any. Not that it needed it particularly, but it's always nice to see the upper limits, so to speak. So, got these screws arranged in the way they were taken off the knife. Let's pop this guy loose, and there we go. What we see here is that this is a pretty vanilla frame lock on the inside, although pretty much nowhere else. You can see, I mean, the lock bar works fine. The lock face is kind of up on this little angle piece here, which is an interesting choice, maybe a little different than usual. But there we go. We can see that we've got washers and bearings here, which are good. You know, that's something a lot of people have talked to me about, like, Nick, how do you feel about the knives that do the bearings right on the titanium? Like, it's one of those things where, yes, you know, the argument is that if you use bearings directly on titanium, they'll wear a groove. You can get all sorts of, you know, little compressions, and that can lead to roughness over time. And, like, at a theoretical level, yeah, sure, 100%. But the thing is, I can't say I've ever seen that happen. You know, my feeling is that by and large it's okay. So it's sort of a belt and suspenders thing. You'll probably be fine without it, but you know what? Why not take the extra step? So there you go. Clean this off here. Clean the pivot off. This is a very nice, well, I shouldn't give too much of a preview of my my actual review, but this is a surprisingly pleasant knife to carry. I mean, it's freaking huge, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you know, it's smartly done. The designer of this guy is not only a decent human, I met him at Blade, but seems to really be thinking. Like, all of the issues that the knife could have had, you can see where in many places he's just kind of made subtle tweaks to adjust around them to make sure they're not actually issues. I'll just clean off the bearings using this alcohol pad here. By the way, this is just a little gun cleaning swatch covered in rubbing alcohol, so there's nothing fancy going on here. There we go. And just trying to remove any gunk-a-dude we got going on there. A little tiny bit of gunk, but not too bad. Like I said, I haven't been out in the swamps with this thing, although God knows it's felt like it. It's like not even 9 a.m. and it's already 90% humidity out there right now. This is Michigan's way of telling me that it's going to try and kill me today. So anyways, look, we've cleaned everything up here. Let's just put the knife back together. That was pretty straightforward. One thing to highlight here is that there is a D shape on one side of the pivot, and that's going to need to be facing the back of the knife. So just keep that in mind. I'll go ahead and use a little bit of lubricant here. Well, knowing me, it probably won't be a little bit. I tend to over-lubricate knives. It's an issue I've got. But anyways, using the 10-weight nano oil right here. Bam. It's probably too much, but what we're going to go ahead and do is just spin that around, and there we go. So there's that. Now the other thing I'm going to do, speaking of over-lubricating knives, I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication around the detent ball hole and onto the path that the detent ball goes on. This just tends to smooth up the action a little bit. By the way, I should highlight that there are not only ceramic bearings, but a ceramic detent ball here. That is it's one of those things that's maybe a luxury. It's not like an, oh my God, how do you not have that? But it is nice. One other thing I'll highlight is there's actually a fair amount of roughness inside the pivot here. this pivot isn't super well drilled out. And I think that accounts for some of the felt roughness in the action when it's kind of doing the fall shut thing. Is actually that pivot roughness. For whatever reason, Kizer lately has not been doing a great job with pivots. You know, they're perfectly functional. The knife is fine, but it's not their best work either. Okay, so there's that. Probably should put the bearing on the other side. This isn't a Grimsmo Rask after all. Whoops. Didn't admit to that. Nope. Now what I'm going to do is actually use, so I've kind of positioned the D-shape hole here over the over the little D in the pivot. And, oh, actually they happen to be well aligned, which is beautiful. But, there we go. So now these guys are inserted. This guy here, the stop pin inside is inserted. So before I go too much further and screw anything up, that's probably a T9 actually. Is it? Seems a little weird. Yeah, it is. All right. I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite, blue thread locker. Blue, blue, blue. There we go. And drop it in there. The reason, as always, for using a little tiny bit of thread locker there is to keep the pivot from backing itself out just during normal use. It's not generally a big issue, but it is a little frustrating sometimes. And then I'll do the same thing on these back handle screws. This is on track to be a very quick disassembly. Then again, this knife is at its core, although the design is very avant-garde, if you will, the construction is, it's a titanium flipper frame lock. I mean, nothing too much interesting there. Note that there was also no internal milling, but at some level that has to be the case because this blade is just freaking huge and heavy. And so it makes sense that they wouldn't want to, because the balance needs to be right, and indeed the balance is right here. So, oh yeah, that's nice. Check for blade. I think I can tighten the pivot down a little bit more. By the way, it's a non-tooled pivot on this side, which is interesting. Oh yeah, there we go. All right, there's your Megatherium all put back together. Hope this was interesting. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. God, I hope it doesn't get any more humid than this.